Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast, coming to you from the Long Valley Studio in Washington, Utah. I'm your host, Dave Markel, and this is episode 176. This week's episode came from a referral from a friend of mine who told me that her mother-in-law had written a book about her experiences with childhood sexual assault, and that she would probably be interested in appearing on this show. So I reached out to her, we talked about it, and now I'm privileged to introduce to you Pamela France, the author of her memoir, Life Soup, testifying of the healing power of Jesus Christ. Pamela's story is captivating. That's about all I want to say about it at this point, because I want to get right to the conversation. I'm positive you won't be sorry you listened in. Here's Pamela. Pamela France, it's really great to have you with me, especially being live in the studio. So welcome to the Sexual Assault Survivor Stories podcast.
Thank you, Dave. And I am very happy to be here.
For my audience, I met Pamela through a mutual friend, actually Pamela's daughter-in-law, and was told that Pamela has a story that fits right into what this podcast is all about. And I'm not going to try and explain that. I'm going to let Pamela do that for you. But first, Pamela, if you don't mind, tell us about yourself.
When I said I'm happy to be here, I am happy to be here at this time in my life because this month I turned 77.
Wow, congratulations.
And regardless of the story that I'm going to share, I feel as though I live in peace. And that is a wonderful place to be. And so when you asked me if I might like to participate in the podcast, I thought, well, this is a perfect time for me to do so. I tend to be an emotional person, and so I feel like I can share my story with you and talk with you in a much more peaceful way than I may have been able to do years ago.
Well, that's great. Tell me more about yourself. Maybe some of your educational background, where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Lapeer, Michigan, which is just east of Flint, Michigan, north of Detroit.
Okay. And
I lived on the lake and swam a lot, fished with my grandmother. I did a lot of boating, did a lot of canoeing with my sister. We used to catch bullfrogs and actually eat them, frog legs. So I had a beautiful place to grow up. I have an older sister. Her name is Patricia, and she passed away a few years ago. And I have a younger sister, Paula, who lives in Michigami, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula. We are very close friends at this time, although that wasn't always the case. I'll share more about that later. But I went to Lapeer High School, graduated, and went on to Adrian College, which is now near Toledo. Got my bachelor's degree there, and then I went on to teach. I actually got my certification to teach high school, 6th grade through 12th grade. My major was sociology, and my minor was home ec. I never really got a full-time teaching job. When I first got married, I had a baby within 9 months after we got married, and my husband worked a shift that we could switch off, and so I was able to substitute teach on a regular basis, and I did that for probably, I'm going to guess, about 3 or 4 years, and that was very beneficial for me. I have 6 children. 4 daughters and 2 sons, 21 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
I've been retired since 2007, but for 11 years I was a school counselor. And prior to that, I worked at Southern Utah University in Student Support Services, working with first-generation college students and helping them to be successful. I got my master's while I was at Southern Utah University and then applied to be the first elementary school counselor in Iron County and got the job.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. I feel like a lot of the process I went through in my education helped me in healing from the abuse that occurred in my life as a child. It was almost like it was planned. I mean, as a school counselor, I got to work with lots of students who struggled and suffered from different kinds of home life. And for me, that was beneficial and helped me. Before we moved here and before I worked at SUU, we lived in Michigan, and for about 6 years, well, I was a homemaker for 17 years, and then I jumped from my home into the frying pan and did protective services for the state of Michigan, investigating child abuse and neglect. And of course, that was crucial for me and my own healing as well. And I put a few pedophiles in jail for the rest of their life and had a lot of success stories with families who were struggling with domestic violence and abuse to their children. We had classes, we had counseling, we could get new apartments. We had all kinds of resources to put in to help families. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that very much, being able to go into a home and visit with a family, become close, see what their needs were, and then be able to assist them in making changes in their family dynamics. That was very rewarding for me personally. Yeah. And then 2015, starting about when I retired, I started to document things and started to write down memories that I had and the feelings that I had, never quite being able to put the puzzle together. 2015, I self-published my own memoir. And in that memoir called Life's Soup, testifying of the healing power of Jesus Christ, I was able to put my puzzle pretty much together. Whether I wanted to or not, it came. And my youngest daughter, our last child at home, she was in high school at the time at this time. I believe my mental health was at a place where I could deal with what the challenges of my childhood had been. I know that a lot of people have different feelings about whether memories are repressed and whether they're not. For me personally, I lived it. I know that those memories were not a part of my life as I went to school, as I made friends, as I was a cheerleader, as I was on the honor society. When I went to college and I excelled in college, those memories were not a part of me, of who I was, and I had put those on the back shelf and actually shut the door. I know that the title of my book, A Memoir, Life's Soup, testifying of the healing power of Jesus Christ, I do not in any way want to alienate any other faiths, whether they're followers of the Savior Jesus Christ or whether they are whatever faith they choose. I do, without a shadow of a doubt, believe that we all have a higher power that we can reach out to. I believe that a lot of my understanding of that has come through my understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous and how that has tremendously helped so many individuals, regardless of their faith, that to be able to acknowledge that you do have a higher power that can assist you and help you. I think that's very important. For me, Jesus Christ is my higher power that has helped me, is my friend, and I believe had significant impact in my healing and my ability to be here with you today and talking about the circumstances of my life. So I grew up in Lapeer, Michigan on Bronson Lake, and my father was a severe alcoholic. My mother drank seldom. Maybe holidays occasionally. Later on, as I became a teenager, my mother joined Alcoholics Anonymous herself, but in the Al-Anon capacity, which is for children and wives of alcoholics. And she would attend regularly. My father became a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but not consistent. And throughout his life, he struggled. There was only once in my life, I tell about it in my book, picked him up from jail. He was walking home. They had released him, but that was because I put him there. I was visiting my mother and dad and with 5 little children in the bedroom, and he came home very drunk. So much so that when he got out of his vehicle, he didn't know which way to turn, and he walked across the street and then came back our way, and I would not have it. I would not have what I had endured as a child happen when he came into the house. So I called the police, which was very difficult for me in the fact that my mother was furious. I'm an adult woman with 5 children, and she was still protecting and enabling my father, which was very hard to deal with. But I did deal with it, and I picked him up from walking home. I said to him, how long? How long is alcohol going to control your life? How long until you leave this world? And that was my only question. And when we got home, he called his sponsor and went to a hospital in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And he was there for probably going on 4 months. And very difficult time. He almost died, they said, because his body was so ravaged from alcohol and with the withdrawal symptoms. And his feet turned black, and he had dry drunk memories. But that was the only time in my life that we sat down as a family and counseled together with a counselor there. And my father expressed his sorrow at the things that he had done in my life and in my younger sister's lives. He was in the Marine Corps in World War II, and he served as a quartermaster in Saipan. He didn't talk about the war much. But when I say he was a severe alcoholic, I'm not sure everybody would understand that. He drank like a 5th of whiskey every day, every other day. He was very violent and would beat my mother in front of us. She did her best to protect us from that kind of violence. In my memoir, I have mentioned about repressed memories, and I called my book Life Soup because I believe that when your teacher asks you to write the timeline of your life, and you start out telling about kindergarten and then move on to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, on up through your years of your life, I believe that we all have life soup. And in that life soup are memories, and they go in there as ingredients. And that throughout our life, some of those ingredients, they flavor our soup without a doubt, but they've dropped to the bottom of the soup, and they're not really visible, or we don't even know they're there until the soup is stirred, or many psychologists call it triggering. And for me, I did an awful lot of research, and so my book, in a way, is a memoir, but it's also a self-help book because I quote quite a few psychologists, a lot of the readings that I've done throughout my life that have impacted me. I've put those in my book so that not in a way of justifying, but as explaining what conclusions I drew and why. Mm-hmm. So there were only a few times in my life where I had very clear memories. I thought about this because as I prepared to come and visit with you, Dave, I read my book again, and I'm always amazed in the last few years. Like I said, I published in 2015. Now that's 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And when I read it, it surprises me because I'm in awe that I was able to explain in such a comprehensive way what happened to me, and do it in a way that I hoped would help other people who also had the same kind of childhoods. I know that your program focuses a lot on sexual assault and rape.
Right.
My experience is quite different because with child abuse, you are groomed. And especially if it's incest, like with me, and I can say that word without falling apart now. If it's a caregiver who's supposed to love and protect you, there are so many emotions because a child wants love from their caregiver, their parent, both their mother and their father. And so it becomes very difficult to separate. Was it my fault that all this occurred? Yeah. And I know a lot of rape victims feel the same way. Did I do something or say something, or what was it, my clothing, the way I danced, or whatever? But for children, it's so much more complex because the need for that kind of love and belonging and acceptance that should come from a parent, that kind of support and that kind of consistent being there for a child, makes it very hard to sort out. My sister and I, we rarely talked when we were young and in our home. She's 3 years younger than I am. And I'm going to say up front, one of the things that I learned about myself as I was dealing with my memories as they started to come, and this puzzle piece would fit in, and then another, and then another, I learned that my relationship with my sister was one of the greatest sources of my shame. Not only was I in a shameful situation with what my father did, his behavior towards me over the years, but my behavior towards my sister when he stopped coming into the bedroom and taking me and took my sister. For me, that was a huge challenge throughout my recovery and my disclosure and my dealing with my healing, to deal with those feelings of regret, those feelings of how could I be glad? How could I be grateful? How could I be happy? How could I be relieved when he's taking my sister? Now I'm talking about a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old. My sister was abused for much longer than I was. She has had a difficult life due to that fact. Been hospitalized several times in the psych ward. She's a cutter. She also is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and has been without alcohol for over 30 years now. She met a wonderful man in Alcoholics Anonymous who has been her companion and helped her all these years. I love her with all my heart and soul. When I got to the place where I had the strength to call her, there had been times she had called me and asked, do you remember anything? They're telling me in the hospital I've experienced some things. And do you remember? And I would say, no, I don't remember anything. And the truth was I didn't until I did.
Yeah.
And so when I had enough strength to call her and say, I am remembering things, and I'm so sorry that I didn't protect you. She was wonderful. We were children. We were babies. How could you?
Yeah.
How could you? My older sister, when I started to share my disclosure with her, she likewise was wonderful, but much more grieving. I had to go to school. I couldn't protect you. When I could, I hid you under the bed or put you in the closet so he couldn't find you. And so for her, she had carried a burden for a long time because she wasn't abused. She was 4 years old when my father came home from the war. She had grown up in a home with my grandparents and my mother's parents. I tell about their histories quite a bit in my book. My mother's parents were both alcoholics. So marrying an alcoholic was not a new thing for my mother. But as time passed throughout her life, I actually have to say that she was a battered woman. She didn't have the self-esteem to know that she could live without my father. Her self-esteem was so tied to his that, she not only enabled, but she lied for him and supported him, and just so that she would never lose him. So anyway, I married a wonderful man who has been there for me, and he is also devoted to Jesus Christ and to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I feel that he and I, together, we've been able to deal with the challenges that have come due to my circumstances. I know that there were times in our married life where he was very confused as far as what was happening and why. When he would find me sitting in a closet because something had occurred to trigger whatever. And I'm not even sure what it was, and I didn't even know why, but that's where I ended up, in the closet, to try to deal with whatever was happening. There were times when the nightmares, which come for many of us who suffer child abuse, when the nightmares would come and I would wake up out of the nightmare and still be living it. My husband had to deal with those times. And those were difficult times in our marriage because he not only didn't understand, I didn't either. Mm-hmm. And so we would just set them aside and almost not even talk about them in some ways. So in my book, I start out by telling the history of my family. I tell snippets of memories that I had that never quite got there for me as far as understanding them. And then later, when I went into counseling, which I did a number of times, in an effort to try to understand why the deep sadness, why the sense of chaos in my heart, why the depression, when I had 6 beautiful children, a wonderful husband who loved me, a nice home, a good job, and yet there were days and times when I would be so depressed and so sad. And there were times, even crucial times, when I would consider taking my own life. I try to express it in words in my book, and it's hard to express because people may not understand this who haven't lived with the nightmares or the depression, where taking your own life becomes a comfort, a reality that would take it all away, and you would be at peace and be, rather than have so much turmoil in your heart and in your mind, and where you feel like you're crazy, but you don't know why. So I probably didn't do a very good job of even expressing that in words. In my book, I'm probably a little more clear. I believe that a penny saved my life. I write about it in my book. I was going to take my life, and the demons were talking big time. You're no good. If people knew who you really were and what had really happened to you, they wouldn't love you. They wouldn't want you around. You just remind people of the horrors. And I'm going to tangent just a little right now, and that is, there are people who have taken my book and they don't want to know the story. They don't want to know about it. They don't want to understand it. They don't want anything to do with it because it does that very thing. It's a reality that a lot of people don't want to look at, that we have in our world, the evil that is in our world that creates that happening, especially to children. People don't want to go there. And when I was investigating child abuse and neglect, I found that to be the case with a lot of people. When confronted, it was very difficult for mothers to know that fathers were abusing, or for fathers to know that mothers were abusing, or for the family to know that an older sibling was abusing. It's not something that we want in our life. We'd rather not have it there, and so let's just not talk about it. So back to my story about the penny. I had planned my own suicide. I had planned it, and the demons were relentless, and yet I couldn't understand. I was in counseling at the time, and trying to sort that out with a counselor. Why am I thinking these thoughts? This is just ridiculous. With the circumstances that I'm in, I just don't get this. And yet, I couldn't get there. That time when I was going to take my own life, and I saw a penny laying on the floor in the light coming through the windows in the curtain windows. And that penny had come to mean a lot to me in my married life. Like I said, with 6 children, I'd been married quite a long time. I mean, we're talking in the years 2000. I was 47 years old and trying to deal with this impending sense of disaster that was going to come, that I didn't have a clue what it was. And throughout our married life, whenever we would go for a walk or whatever, my husband and I would pick up loose change on the sidewalk or in the parking lot or in the store or wherever. And over time, when we would do that, it got to a place, well, you may know what it's like to have not 2 pennies to rub together. We had our hard times like everybody does, and I would pick up the coins, or he would pick up the coins, and we would press them into our palms. And the Heavenly Father's thinking of us. He knows our circumstances. We're okay. We're going to make it. He's there for us. And so, over time, that's what it was like for us. Heavenly Father knows us. We're going to be okay. So, fast forward to this fatal night of my planning, and this shiny penny shows up in the light. I picked it up. I clung to it. I did not follow the plan. The demons were not happy. I clung to that penny, and they were relentless. And when I got up in the morning, I finally knew why I was wanting to kill myself, and that was I was a victim of my father's sexual abuse. I was a victim of incest. And the Pamela who had been the perfect daughter, excelled in high school and college, and was a great mom and a great wife, that person, that didn't fit with her. She didn't want that part of her. So that door that I had closed, I couldn't keep it closed anymore. It just opened and opened. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep it closed. And so I clung to that penny. I still love finding change on the ground, and so does my husband. I took that penny with me for the next couple of weeks and kept it right with me the whole time, holding it. And I called my husband on the phone, and I said, I've talked with my therapist. He's known for a long time what I'm dealing with, but was unable to confront me with that information until I was ready. And even though he knew what I was dealing with based on some of the things that I had shared with him about my childhood, he wasn't able to say, I believe you're a victim of sexual abuse as a child, because I wouldn't have heard it. I wouldn't have let him tell me that. Right. And so I just told my husband on the phone, you can call up my therapist. Well, I have to just step back, because when I phoned my husband, I had said goodbye to him in such a way that he was very worried, alarmed. He knew I was going to the counselor, and he was saying to me, why do you have to go to a counselor? Can't you just talk with me? I mean, what is it that is happening? And I know that he may have feared of other things were going on that would impact him as well. That I stepping out on him? Why, had I stolen something? I can imagine some of the things he probably thought about. This wasn't one of them, I don't think, based on his knowledge of who I am. He is a very, very tender and loving, compassionate lover, which I am so grateful for, because even though there were certain things that he couldn't quite understand were a problem, he never questioned those things and never said, never told me that seems weird. He never ever said those kinds of things. He was just always very kind and very loving towards me. So our own sex life has been a healthy one and a wonderful one based on that, which he is the penny I've always had in my life. So I'm very blessed that way, very, very fortunate. And so I just told him, you can call my therapist and he'll talk with you. And that's when the door opened wide and I started to have many memories come back and fit together with the snippets that I had. That's when I called my sisters. That's when I was able to continue with my counseling. But it wasn't easy, because the inner child, I rejected my inner child, basically. I didn't want anything to do with her. I know she'd suffered and whatever, but I didn't want to deal with that. And so to protect myself, I repressed all of that, which at the same time I repressed her. So my next adventure then, after admitting what had happened to me, was actually connecting with my inner child and asking her for forgiveness and coming to love and appreciate who she was and what she had dealt with. And that was challenging for me to do that, because you know how it is. I'm sure you've met a lot of people, and I've kind of alluded to it a little bit. I don't want that in my life. I don't want that part of my life. I mean, I've even had people really close to me read my book and go, I don't want this to be your life.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. Because I don't want it to be my life either.
Right.
And I spent 47 years repressing it, running away from it. So when I admitted it finally to myself what was going on and started to love that inner child, after I talked to my sisters, there were moments when she would literally be screaming in my head, you told, you're in danger. And then the fear would just be almost overwhelming. But I'm thankful for children, my own children, who helped me through those days, my husband, my sisters, my therapist, because as I came to accept and love that inner child, I was really accepting who I am and loving myself. I have even gotten to a place where I was able to forgive my father, which a lot of people can't get there.
Yeah.
And because of the trauma, it is trauma. I still deal at some times, and I know my sister does as well, with post-traumatic stress disorder, which has in and out. We could have another whole podcast about that and the symptoms that come from that for people.
Yeah.
I got to a place where I was able to actually let that burden go. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read. It's only a few paragraphs.
Oh, absolutely.
In the epilogue of my book. I wrote this book, and then they published a second edition, and I would like to talk about how wonderful writing is for the healing of a person, how it can actually put things in a better perspective and order for you in your mental health. When things seem so disconnected and chaotic, writing is really a wonderful way to help to organize those thoughts and help you to make sense of what you're living and what you're thinking and what you're feeling. This epilogue was written November 12th, 2015. So this was after I had written my book and my husband and I had traveled to Michigan. Writing my own memoir seems now to be a distant experience. All those 7 years of being buried in its creation lifted a burden that I cannot express in words and do it justice. As I reread it now, I feel awed that my Savior, Jesus Christ, helped me every step of the way. In the prologue of my book, I write most importantly for those with childhoods filled with abuse who seek peace. I acknowledge that this peace we seek, although elusive, is attainable. It has been a surprise for me how many women impacted by abuse, but not the victim, have come to me and expressed deep feelings of gratitude. Thank you for writing what I could not. Thank you for helping me understand my own mother who was abused. Thank you for helping me to grasp what my mother was going through. She committed suicide. These expressions of gratitude have meant the world to me. I had the opportunity to travel to Michigan and visit the graves of my parents. I stood at my father's grave and I felt a deep sense of sorrow and compassion for him. He had made life choices that tremendously impacted his family, and I wondered what it had done to his own self-worth. He had misused his power during his days here on the earth. I couldn't help but contrast his choices to my own dear companion, my sons, my son-in-laws, and my father-in-law, who was a wonderful man. I prayed for my father that day. I prayed that in the next life he was making better choices. walking hand in hand with my husband, leaving the cemetery that sunny day, I felt healed in a profound way and felt a sense of closure as never before. I found a new extraordinary measure of peace. I expressed a very personal, silent, and sincere prayer of gratitude. I felt a consummate appreciation for my life's soup and all its ingredients.
That's beautiful.
Well, I appreciate you letting me share that.
Absolutely. I'm glad you did.
I am so grateful that by writing the memoir, I'm at the place in my life where I've had many, many years of peace and been able to support my sister and love her and have a very close relationship and be an important person in her life. I'm grateful for those blessings that come from being able to face what has happened, being able to understand it and deal with it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate this opportunity, Dave. I hope there's somebody out there who may be listening, who may be feeling this chaos that comes with child abuse. Unfortunately, a lot of abusers are victims of child abuse. But I believe peace is attainable not only for victims as well as perpetrators. It's all in the choices we make.
Mm-hmm. Pamela, would it be okay if I asked you a few questions?
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Because in my mind, as you related your story, some questions came to mind about your own mental health, your coping mechanisms, both early on and as you got into adulthood. Did the repression of memories of the abuse cause a hole in your life? In other words, did you feel like something's missing? I have wonderful memories. I had a great childhood, but I think something's missing that I just don't know what it is. Did those feelings come to you or those thoughts?
That's pretty complicated in that for a time I lived near my parents as a married woman and as an adult person. And I even took my children to my parents' home to visit. I never wanted to leave them overnight there, ever. And that was such a absolute not going to happen thing that I never really quite understood that. So those meanings of that, those kinds of behaviors, they were always kind of there. Mm-hmm. When you say, was there something missing, I always had this feeling of not loving my dad like I thought I should. When you have your own children and they're his grandchildren and you're thinking, and my sister didn't live near. She moved far away. She lived near for a time, but it became too difficult. And so they actually packed up and moved far away from my dad, and I don't think she had much contact with him after that. Even the contact with my older sister and him was not good. And when my mother passed, that opened up a whole new set of feelings about negative feelings towards my father. And I even have in my book where I wrote him a letter telling him about the abuse and saying, let's set that aside and try to have some kind of a relationship. And this is after I hadn't seen her, talked to him, or heard from him for years. Mm-hmm. So when you ask if there was a hole, the answer to that is yes. The hole was, what is this hole that I can't understand, this this thing that's missing between this connection with my own father. And what made it worse, Dave, is watching my own children and their relationship with their father, my dear husband. And I'm lacking that. Why? Why am I lacking that? So the repressed memories, they do that to you. You know, you're right. It was missing. It was a hole in my life that I couldn't fill and couldn't understand why not. Now, as far as my mother is concerned, a lot of people ask me right from the get-go, did your mother know? I put that right in the front of my book, but that's almost always the first question. Why didn't your mother protect you? Did she know? I actually believe that my mother didn't know in the way that you would think you would know. That sounds like a cyclical thing, but I feel like she may have known, but how could she have dealt with it? Truthfully, how could she have dealt with it in a healthy way when she was so invested, her personality, everything she did, in my father? How could she have dealt with it? She did protect us from physical violence. Many times she would step in between if he was going to come for us or physically harm us like he did her. She would rather have him beat her up in front of us than have him touch any one of us. And she made that very clear early on in my life, that he wasn't to touch the daughters. So I can't judge my mother because I didn't walk in her shoes. She grew up in an alcoholic home with both her parents who were alcoholics. I don't believe she had the same violence in her home. I was closer to my mother than my sister, my younger sister, because I don't believe there was any relationship there. I think my mother had to separate herself from us girls, knowing what, in the way down in her hidden thoughts, what was probably happening to us. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah.
To say it like that.
It does to me. And I think the audience has listened to me enough, most of them, about some of the neuroscience of trauma and the reactions that we as humans have in our sensory perceptions, both physical and mental perceptions based on what we're seeing and hearing, that would make sense to a lot of people.
Well, she was so traumatized time and time and time again by our father that you're no good. She worked a lot, and it wasn't until we were actually teenagers that she was able to keep her paycheck. And she mostly did it to buy groceries. I know that sounds crazy, but he would take her paycheck and drink half of it away, and then there was no money for clothes, for shoes, for groceries, or anything. And so, but she got to a place where she was strong enough to prevent him from taking her paycheck so she could take care of us girls and herself and him. Sure. Literally. So it wasn't just for us girls. I mean, it was for both them as well. But right. She got there. Sure. So why didn't she have the strength to face him on what he was doing to his daughters? I can't answer that. I can't say she knew definitively or she didn't know definitively or she was glad he was hurting us and not her. I mean, I don't know all those things because I dealt with some victims of child abuse in my protective services time. When the women would say, I knew he was doing that, but what was I going to do about it? How could I do anything about it? And then I've had women that knew that he was abusing their children, both boys and girls, and then stay with him and go to court with him and speak for him. And so, it's a very complex thing. And
it really is, yeah.
And the law, I'm grateful for the laws that are in place to protect children. When women are like that, mothers are like that, and it is disclosed that this kind of thing is happening to a child, I'm grateful that children are taken from those homes and put in caring and loving foster homes and raised away from that kind of complexity of feelings, relationships, needs, unmet and needs, desires. And so I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to serve when I did, right, and help those few families that I was able to help. So,
how much did your education as a child abuse and child sex assault protector in your protective service days in Michigan, how much did that education help you in understanding your own past?
I really believe in hindsight, that's the only way I looked at it, because I didn't face my father's threatening behaviors about if I were to tell until I had crossed and that door had opened. And that I'd long since left Michigan and worked at SUU and as an elementary school counselor then, when that door opened. And so for me, in hindsight, I think, my goodness, every path I took brought me closer to opening that door. Every choice I made. So why did I apply to protective services? Did my subconscious, that subconscious that is there for all of us, that is so powerful, did it know where it was directing me? Well, I mean, I would guess yes.
Oh, yeah, I would say so too.
And it did help me tremendously as I saw children. When I was able to protect some children. I may not have been able to protect myself. I may not have been able to protect my sister. But I was powerful enough. And that's one of the things in my book that I guess I haven't addressed at all, is that there are a couple of incidents I share in this book about being powerful over my father when I was a child. And he was very powerful in my life. But there were a couple of times where I had the upper hand. And I share those in my book. One of them is as simple as there's a terrible quarrel going on in my house. My dad is yelling and my mom is trying to evade. She's trying to distract. She's trying to make him happy. She's yelling and everything is chaos. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm scared to death. I run outside and climb up in the top of a tree that sits in the front of our yard. I'm 10 years old, and I'm up there in the tree, and he comes out and says, "Come down," from the top of the tree. And I say, "No, I'm not coming down." And he's furious and was going to come up after me. He's drunk, of course. He can't come up after me, and I don't come down. And he keeps telling me to get down there or this or this or this or this or this or this. I don't do it.
Yeah.
I remember that powerful moment with the wind in my hair and looking out at the lake. And I mean, I believe those moments of having power helped me get to the place where I was powerful enough to face what had occurred in my life. We need those. We need to feel our own self-power. Yeah. Even when we don't have any. It makes me think of Man's Search for Meaning with Viktor Frankl, where he had no power to help anybody, against the Nazis or anything. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has read this, Man's Search for Meaning.
It's an amazing book.
But he says the only power he had was to not change, to be the man of compassion and caring that he was, even towards the Nazi guards.
Yeah.
He refused to give up that power to be who he was. And that was a significant thing for me in college. I did a research paper on his book. I believe that so much of abuse in this world is misuse of power. Husbands misusing their power around their wives and their children. Wives misusing power to the people in their lives that they love that are vulnerable. And siblings misusing power. And we could talk a lot about power in this world today. There's a lot of people in this world, politicians and wars going on and everything, where power, you could just talk about it, that misuse of power creates so much of the havoc we have in this world.
Exactly. Are you able to help me understand what you think it was that activated those memories coming back? Usually psychologists and neuroscientists that study trauma and the brain say that it doesn't happen until someone feels safe and feels like letting those memories come out. I mean, it's an autonomic reaction. It's not something we have control over. But what do you think activated those memories when they started coming to you?
Well, I've alluded to it just a tad, and that is my youngest was in high school, my youngest daughter. She was about to graduate, I believe, from high school or close to it. And my husband was wonderful. I mean, we've had our ups and downs of dealing with our own emotional natures, dealing with anger between each other and dealing with the normal challenges of married life. In my book I share, and it's when I phoned my husband, it's in the chapter about the penny. I phoned my husband and I said to him that he could call the counselor, fill him in on what was going on with me. His comment at that time was, he says to me, "I don't care what you have to tell me. Whatever you have to tell me will be fine. I will love you no matter what, forever." Here it is. I went straight away and called my husband. His voice resonated with feeling as he said, "I don't care what you have to tell me. No matter what it is, I love you. There is nothing you could ever tell me that will change that." And so for me, it really was where I had come to a place of safety. I didn't feel like my adult children would be probably hurt as much by what they would learn about their mother as my little children. And, you know, you're always wanting to do your very best. I know that, Dave, I was a chain breaker. I wasn't an abuser of my children. You know, we spanked years ago when spanking was the thing, you know, you spanked your children. That's about as far as any abuse that you could even say was abuse. When they did something they shouldn't do, they got spanked or they got in trouble and they were grounded or whatever. But as an abuser, never. I even ran a daycare when we were still back in Michigan and cared for lots of youngsters in my daycare, and some challenging ones, but I wasn't an abuser. And for me, I think that also gave me a sense of power that I had over what I had lived. So, yeah, That's huge. I think I was safe thanks to my dear husband and thanks to my circumstances, financially, my ability to earn money myself and have my own job and care for other children. I know that doesn't come to a lot of people who've had abuse in their life, where they don't ever get to feel safe. They don't ever get to that place where they feel safe. So I'm very fortunate in that way, and I express that in my epilogue, how grateful I am to my Heavenly Father that I was able to be blessed to come to that place of safety. And like I said, I write a whole chapter about forgiveness in here, and I know how hard forgiveness is. Forgiveness is something that a lot of people think that you do for the other person who harmed you. Mm-hmm. When in actuality, when you come right down to it, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. If you are able to give forgiveness to that person who harmed you, who injured you in devastating ways, that have lived with you and will live with you forever, if you're able to give them forgiveness and set that burden of shame and put it in their court, then it's a gift you give yourself because it brings immediate peace. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention about shame. You know, the perpetrator is very good at putting the shame on the child, on whomever they've harmed, making them feel shamed. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and that comes through all the time. Yeah. And victims of sexual abuse, where they feel like it's their fault, they should be ashamed of themselves, and that's a sad thing. Yeah. It's a very sad thing to have to deal with.
And hard to overcome.
And very hard to overcome. Mm-hmm. But when you're able to set that aside and give the shame where it belongs, it's a life giver.
Yeah. Pamela, are you able to tell us when in your life Christ became a part of your life in general? Because it doesn't sound like you were raised in much of a Christian home. No. When did that occur, and what was the timeline as far as your recovered memories and your faith having a part in your active life?
Well, thank you, Dave, for that question, because that's the first chapter in my book. And it is a story about when I was just a little girl. And I was sharing a twin bed with my younger sister, and my older sister slept in the same bedroom with us. I woke up, I got up, I was in a little sunsuit, barefooted, and just a little pair of panties, and went outside, and we had a little puppy at the time, and I grabbed the little puppy as I was going out, tied him up with a little piece of binder twine around the neck, and I thought, I can go for a walk around the block. I wasn't in kindergarten, so I was about 4 years old. I can do that without permission. Everybody else is asleep. It was a Sunday morning. I walked about a block. On the corner where we lived was a church with a crescent window on the bottom side, 2 crescent windows. I looked in there in that crescent window, and I'll be darned if there wasn't a lot of little kids like me in there. And I'm watching and watching, and pretty soon I feel a hand on my shoulder, and I look up, and here's this really lovely lady who smelled so good, has her hand on my shoulder, and she asks if I'd like to come in and color with the children, and I said yes. So she took my puppy, and we walked in the church and down into the basement of the church, and she tied my dog to the chair. I sat down with my crayons, and I was coloring in the most wonderful place. Such a spirit I had never felt before, such a calmness, such a loving place. It's palpable, but I'm not able to completely give you the sense that memory stayed with me for my whole life. Next thing I know, I hear a tap, 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 tap on the window, and it's my mom. And I get very frightened, and my mom's pointing, and the lady says, okay, and she takes me outside and gives my hand to my mom, and I'm just scared to death. I have no idea what they're saying to each other. I don't know anything. And my mom she just walks just one step right after the other, almost marching me home. And we get home. She still hasn't talked to me. She takes me in the bathroom. She takes off my sunsuit and my panties, puts me in the bathtub, turns on the water, gives me a bath, washes my hair. I don't know what's going on. She gets me out. She's raking my hair with the brush, just brushing it and braids it. I have long blonde hair, and then she leaves me standing there in the bathroom. She comes back, and she's got my sandals, a pair of socks, and a little dress, and some clean panties. She puts them on me, and she looks at me and says, do you want to go back there? The ladies invited you to come back. Do you want to? And I said, yes. And she dressed me and marched me back.
Wow.
And for the next, who knows how many Sundays, she got me ready, and I went back all by myself for as long as we remained living in Columbiaville. And when I became a youth, when I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade, and the Bible study people would come to our neighborhood and want to gather a group of children together to have Bible group study. I don't remember what church it was that did it. My mother would always allow me and let me go no matter what my dad said, no matter what my sisters didn't want to do it. I don't even know if they knew about it. But I would go and be with them. And then as a teenager, when I started to go to church all by myself and became a member of the Methodist Church, which my father was a member, my mother was Catholic, she would drive me always until I could drive myself. So I'm very, very grateful to my mother for that, because from the time she knew that I wanted that, I sought after that, she supported me in that until I learned what the desires of my own heart were as far as faith is concerned. And when I became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, my mother never balked. She never made any kind of a comment against the church or why did you do such a thing or anything. And at that time, we're talking 1972, the media wasn't as positive about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as they are now. And but she was so accepting of me and that I made that choice. And she did make a comment once about the temple garments that we wear to go into the temple, which you can read about online now, and they explain everything that why they are and what they are. She just made a comment once when she was at my house, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was in the last year of her life. She had developed lung and liver cancer. Liver cancer is the aggressive one that killed her. She was folding my laundry with me. She was just there for an afternoon or a morning, I forget, for some reason. I might have been doing some sewing for her or something. And she made the comment, it must be wonderful to believe in something so much that you would wear these. And that was that was the only time and I didn't put that in my book, so that was about the only time she made any comment about my faith. I think my mother was a woman of faith in her own way. She did go to her priest for help, I know that as a fact, to try to figure out the violence and the abuse. He wasn't any help, I'm afraid. And he just sent her home and said, just be a good wife and whatever. We even had the Methodist reverend come to our house, and he accepted a pledge from my father, and that was all the help that she got. So I think her Alcoholics and Anonymous and Al-Anon membership became that connection with her higher power, because they acknowledge that when you gather in Al-Anon, they acknowledge that. So rather than go to church, my mom, did that. We did go to church occasionally as a family, rarely, but Easter, my dad would buy corsages for my mom and all of us, and we would go to church. I only remember going once or twice at the most. And usually it was because we were going to have company come and they were going to go to church or something. My father was raised in a Methodist home, and both my grandparents were active Methodist churchgoers. So he was raised as a Christian.
The reason I asked, Pamela, is because I think we don't talk about it much on this show, the faith influence. But I do know from talking to many of my guests off the air that their faith is a huge part of their recovery, of their realization, of sometimes even the release of the shame.
Yes.
Early on, even while the shame influence is still big in their life. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that faith and God, a higher being, as you say in AA, is a critical aspect in many victims and survivors' lives. So I appreciate your boldness and your courage and your strength and faith being a part of your story. I think there are so many in the audience that need to hear that.
Oh, thank you, Dave.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this venue to express my testimony of my faith. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to do that openly.
Yeah, and I'm sure that I'm going to get texts and emails and letters and phone calls from people wanting to get in touch with you.
Oh.
So we'll talk about that after we're done. Pamela, we had talked earlier about you wanting to talk about some other aspects of what came out of not only the book, but your experience.
Well, I did want to let people know about publishing and writing their own memoir.
Right.
I think attending classes to learn how to write a memoir, to go to writing classes that can help you heal, they're really, really beneficial. I was very fortunate to belong to a group of women in Kanab, where I lived, that helped support me in writing my memoir and helped me by being readers of each chapter and helping guide me throughout the whole process. What I ended up doing is, after I wrote my memoir, I put it on Kindle Direct Publishing, which is you can self-publish a book, and that's where it's available now, is on Amazon. And I only mention that because I want to spin off from that and say that at one point HarperCollins wanted to pick up my book, and they called me and asked me if I would be interested. And I told them that I would be interested. So they drew up a proposal for me and put me in their HarperCollins publishing place, called a division of HarperCollins Christian Publishing, which was Elm Hill. And why I'm even sharing this is at the time when I paid a considerable amount of money for them to do that for me, they had included in that they would assist me with marketing. Well, in fact, that actually did not happen. What they did is they put my book as a non-refundable book at the sites that they said they were going to put it, like Barnes & Nobles and other places. A non-refundable book, and they also listed it as a textbook. That's goes without saying that during the application process, they didn't like that I had Book of Mormon quotes in my book and told me that it was that wouldn't be good. So they couldn't have those quotes in their Christian Elm Hill publishing company because they didn't believe it to be the Word of God. And I know that they had done other things with Latter-day Saints in their publishing, but I didn't question it when they said, but we can offer you the same things with this printing company. And I said, fantastic, then let's go for it. Because I really didn't want to leave those things out of my book. It didn't seem like that would be honest on my part to take those things out of my book because they were a big part of it. And I'd gotten permission from so many people. When you write a book, you have to get copyright permissions from so many people. If you put a song in, if you put a poem in, if you put any section of a story, an article from Brene Brown, any of those kind of things that you put in your book, you have to get permissions. And so I had done all those things and shared them with them. And so they went ahead and they published my book, the second edition. And it also has my epilogue in it, and and they published it in hardcover. But then when I went to Barnes & Noble in different places to try to do a book reading or something, Barnes & Noble was not willing to purchase my book because it was non-refundable. And so when they explained that to me, I went to HarperCollins, the Elm Hill people, and the printing company and said, I want to change what you've designated this. Why have you done that? And why isn't my book listed as a memoir self-help book rather than a textbook? And they refused to do that at that time. And so time passed. I would purchase my own books from the printing company and also from Amazon, which continued to publish. And time passed. We moved. All these things happened. And then I got back to a place where I wanted to order some author books. And you pay a little bit less when you are the author, so that then you can order 30 books and you pay less, and then you can go to a book reading and you have those available for people to purchase. And that would have been, I would have been able to do that then at Barnes & Noble if I brought my own books with me. And lo and behold, the printing company had some, this was what they said, they had some major computer problems and my book has been lost. And they won't be publishing my book unless I would like to send them another copy of it, because they always had to send you what they had created. You had to approve it and then send it back. So I still had those computer-generated copies to send them back. And they said, but it'll cost you this amount of money. So I just wanted to say, I just really felt strongly that I believe that stories need to be out there for people. I believe that even though some people don't want to read my story, I make it very clear in the beginning of my book that this is rated R based on reality.
Right.
And I don't want you to read it if it's going to be disturbing to you. But I just need you to I need you to know up front that this is an easy read, but it's not an easy read.
Yeah, I get that.
It's only 216 pages, but on Amazon, it was free. I could I could publish my book, make changes, I could do whatever I wanted, and purchase as many books as I wanted. And HarperCollins, this printing company, alluded to the fact, Elm Hill alluded to the fact that Amazon really doesn't like it when they publish books that have already been published on Amazon. So I am not at this time really clear on what happened, whether Amazon contacted them and caused them some problems, and they're not willing to relate that to me because of the thousands of dollars I gave them to be my agent, basically. Agents are expensive.
Yes.
For authors. And so, but anyway, bottom line, I would just say be careful and not just listen to all the sales talk that's given to you about publishing. There are so many venues now that are out there. I went on their Facebook page at one point and expressed my concern that they weren't helping me with marketing because they had made the book the wrong category, et cetera, et cetera. Within 24 hours, my comment was deleted from their Facebook page, as well as another woman who'd done the same thing. So, I don't want to say any more than that. That's enough to know that there are dangers out there, that they're in it to make money, and even though they're big companies, well-known companies, I would recommend Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing because it was wonderful. The people that I worked with, the people I talked to, the process, everything is great. And that's the only place now there where I get my author copies from, so I can have some available when I talk to friends and family. And like I'm going to sign that one for you, Dave. That's going to be yours
nice
to keep.
I would love that.
And the only difference in the first edition and the second edition was that I did write the epilogue about visiting my father's cemetery and the feelings that I had there. And so I just print it and staple it in the books that I get from Kindle, and I could actually take the time and go to Kindle Direct Publishing and add that, and I may do that down the road, but I haven't done it as yet. Yeah. So I'm going to give you this.
I don't know about others listening, but I appreciate the education, and I'm sure there are going to be people out there who are very thankful that you were willing to share all of that, because it is critical information if somebody's wanting to write a book.
It is.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Pamela, this has been an amazing time to be able to sit and hear your story, hear your experience, talk about these things with you and ask you questions. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your willingness and for your strength and fortitude to do this. It's very commendable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate being able to be here.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. Before we close out this episode, I want to take a moment to honor Pamela France and her memoir, Life Soup. What stands out to me is that Pamela didn't come to this conversation from a distance. She's been an educator, worked in child protective services, and she later served students and families as a school counselor. So her voice carries both personal experience and years of being close to people who are trying to put their lives back together. And if you're listening right now and any part of this hits you in the chest, please hear me. You are not alone. That is one of the reasons Pamela put her story out into the world. And it's one of the reasons this show exists, to help bring the power of sharing our experiences in a safe place where guests are believed and feel a sense of community. Take care of yourself after this episode. Reach out to someone safe. And if you want to read Pamela's story in her own words, look up Life Soup by Pamela Lynn France. You'll find it on Amazon. And as I close out this episode, let me remind you to please do your part to help bring justice to victims and survivors. A great way to do this is to start by believing, and to help normalize the conversation about the realities of interpersonal violence. Because the truth is, we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.